Okay, good night, good evening, everybody. And just a quick reminder, Budget Workshop is a work session for the board. Any questions regarding the Budget Workshop can be asked later in regular session under public comment. So it is an open dialogue between board members and district officials and CBO guests to help us with development purposes. Again, this is our second Budget Workshop. All our folks in attendance, our Board of Education, Superintendent, Assistant Superintendent, and our clerk. Just a reminder, there are avenues for community members, faculty, and staff who wish to ask questions. You can obviously go to our website for this information. And there is a dedicated Board of Education budget email for questions pertaining to budget development that we try to respond to within 24 to 48 hours. Tonight is number 2. Our first meeting was on the 4th, where we looked at the first draft. Tonight, we will also be looking at the second draft, so to speak, and then we have some updated information from the state and federal government. So we are going to look at our draft review. We do have some information to share, but we're also going to answer some questions that have come through the Budget Workshop thought exchange. So there's a few areas that are good historically to review, but also are addressing questions that came up through the public, and this is the perfect opportunity to answer some of those questions while educating and obviously helping us with our decisions. So thank you, Cynthia, for being in attendance tonight. Okay, and I will move through these quickly. These will not change. So again, our guiding principles, we have stated these now for, pretty much 8 to 10 years. They have not changed. Budget workshop process, again, what we're accomplishing tonight. And that 4th bullet is really important. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create dialogue, answer questions containing, everything containing to the budget. So just an idea of where we are with our working budget, and I apologize it's a little small. We tried to fit it on the screen. So slight change from last, as we are working through gathering the latest information. There's a lot of information that has been publicized that we are working through. We are still showing a slight deficit of $440,000, $42,000. However, I wanted to highlight that with the information that I'm going to share about federal stimulus funds, potential more state aid, we know if that comes to fruition, which we expect to some degree, that deficit is going to be impacted positively as a result of that. But also we want to point that we are using considerable fund balance and reserves this year, and that could be an area that we want to look at in future meetings to potentially reduce that. As I'll talk later on, that's an area that we have tried to be conscious of. So we are still showing a slight deficit. We do expect the numbers to tighten up the closer we get to April 1st, which is the state deadline for a new budget. So some information that you hopefully have seen or you've heard about at this point, both the Senate and the Assembly submitted their bills, which are in comparison to the executive budget, which we have been working from since mid-January, late January. And it's quite a change from where we were, obviously in August, when we were discussing 20% reductions or withholds, to now looking at potentially record increases from the state. So what a difference 8 months makes. Now, the information is wonderful to see. We're hopeful, but it's not official. It hasn't been enacted, and so until we actually have this in front of us as a completed and approved bill, it's cautiously optimistic. What's interesting about the 3rd bullet, where it says both sums do appear to exclude amounts from federal stimulus funding. One of the major issues from the governor's budget was basically taking federal funds and simply supplanting state funds. So it was a 0-0 impact on the books. What both House bills are saying is we want to supplement what the state is providing, not supplant. And that's a very critical term, because if the federal stimulus funds are X and the state is going to add Y, then that's obviously a greater revenue source and greater number for us, which is going to benefit us. So that's very positive language in both House budgets. So 2 other items, foundation aid and then STAR and service aid. Starting with STAR and service aid, both of those bills reject the governor's proposal. He was going to have an adjustment called the local district funding adjustment, which was going to impact our STAR reimbursement. And then also was proposing to consolidate 11 aids into that services aid. And as Cynthia and Kathy have provided before, those are expense-driven aids. So if you consolidate them and you create one aid, then that whole idea of the more you spend, the more you receive, in particular, say, Boces, where it's the idea is to get you to do it to save money through that process, that would have been eliminated. We are hopeful that this goes through and that concept of a service aid generic bucket is not going to happen.
So one question I have about that, didn't they consolidate some line items last year, or is that?
They proposed it and it
Oh,
was
they
rejected.
proposed it,
Yep.
okay, okay, good. So the same thing,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
So for the second year, the governor proposed this, and you
Okay.
see that there was going to be a significant hit. And in particular, and Cynthia, please correct me, one of the major issues was that the reduced spending last year as a result of COVID was going to then, because it's built on the past year, was going to artificially reduce what we were expecting to see. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So again, this is really good news.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece of information regarding foundation aid. So this is the discretionary amount, formula-driven, that each school district receives, and this is purely discretionary. It's not tied to any specific expense that you have to spend. It has been frozen for a number of years, and so what we've hoped that we would be, as soon as possible, having the amount that we're allotted per the formula. So the formula has us at X, the state has been funding us at Y. And they've kept that frozen for a number of years. There's been lawsuits, there's been litigation to get that to be fully funded. Sometimes you'll hear fully fund foundation aid. Well, now, per these two bills, they're suggesting that that could happen, and that within a 3-year span, we could have what our allotment per the formula is supposed to be. And Cynthia, any more on that that you want to add to?
No, we're just really waiting to see what happens in the final state budget if that goes through or not. It would be a significant shift from the past couple of budgets. Good news, though. Good news.
Yeah. So, again, very, very, it's great news to hear potential record increases, but again, we just need to make sure that we receive it.
Uh-huh.
And then on the latest federal stimulus plan that was enacted and signed by the President, American Rescue Plan, per Senator Schumer's office, we are allotted $2.7 million. And so we received a phone call and some information from the Senator's office, and the questions we asked were, is this come right to the district or does it go to New York State? And his response was it goes to New York State, which means it will then be allotted to us once it's given to New York State. We don't expect that to be that we're not going to get everything. It's a matter of it not coming to us directly. So that's just one item to be aware of. And then the second one is we don't know if it's a 1 year or a multiple year. At least as of yesterday, Cynthia, has anything changed?
To the best of our knowledge, we believe that we'll be able to spend it through September of 2023. However, we don't know when the funds will become available yet.
Okay.
So hopefully more information to come on that as well.
Okay.
When you say a multiple year allotment, you mean the 2.73 each year or the 2.73 over the course of, okay.
That's what we mean. Yep. And again, that would be much more helpful than to get all one large lump sum and then have to try to figure out how to save it, where to put it. One of the items I did mention, and I should have in the previous slide, was that both bills also are trying to expand for a short period of time your ability to hold on to more reserves. Right now it's 4%. There was anywhere from 6 to 8 have been proposals, and it would only be for a couple years. But it allows us to take money like this that we obviously need but don't have an immediate need and hold on to it and spread it out over a couple years, which, as we talked about, I think Kathy Blackman mentioned the cliff years after the money runs out. That's what would be nice to be able to hold on to so that we can kind of work our way through the next couple of years. So, Cynthia, anything else regarding from the state budget or the federal stimulus that you think is important to add that I haven't mentioned?
No, not at this time. There's just really a lot of moving parts, more so than in normal years due to the federal stimulus, and we really need to see how it all plays out before we can make further decisions on which path would be the best way to go.
Okay. So again, it's good news. I mean, compared to where we were, no one's complaining. It's just, we just need to make sure it actually happens. And we think it will, but at the federal level, we know the state level is really where, we're not 100% sure. So I mentioned this before, so we've been in the same situation now it's almost 10 years, 11 years ago. Back in 2009, Great Recession, President Obama and Congress passed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or ARA. And so I want to show you how that impacted the district and the decisions the districts made, or this district made back then, because it parallels where we are today. We're going to get a stimulus package. We're likely to have it spread out over a couple budget cycles, and there's going to be decisions that we have to make during this next couple of years to make sure that we use those funds smartly and obviously fiscally conservative, or at least strategically. So a little bit of history lesson, but also it's important. So going back to 2009 and 10, and so if you look at the blue line, this is the district's use of fund balance and reserves. So we mentioned on the first slide under the working budget, that number right now is 1.7. And obviously we have reserves and fund balance for use, but you want to be cautious about using that to fill gaps that you're not going to address in future years. The orange line represents the fiscal stimulus fund, so those 3-year allotment of the ARA funds. So I'll just start with the fiscal stimulus. So in year 1, 2009-10, the district received 2.2, a little over 2.2. In year 3, it was allotted 966, and in year 3, it was 880. So when you add that up, that's the grand total that we received for the federal stimulus funds. Now, in year 1 of receiving those funds, the district only appropriated or only assigned and used a little under $188,000 of reserve and fund balance. Now, move to year 2 and year 3, and then we'll get to year 12, 13, because that's the start of some decision making that we had to have. We used sizable amount of fund balance and reserves. And where you see the cliff years that Kathy had mentioned, years where you're not addressing the underlying reason for spending all that money. If your expenditures stay the same and you have to keep using fund balance and reserves to pay the bills, and the revenue is falling off and not making up, then you've got that massive cliff that you now have to address. And so in these 3 years, and say 4 years being 12, 13, where we used another 2.5, we were we overspent, if you will, or had 3.7 less revenue than we needed, which caused, if you recall, in 12, 13, and 13, 14, we had to make major reductions. And on this next slide, it just shows you the significance of where we were. So in 12, 13, so this is total fund balance, or total reserves and total fund balance. So in 12, 13, because we had used millions of dollars in those 3 previous years, we were significantly under, we did not have enough reserves and fund balance. We were very, very under capacity, I guess the best term. In 12, 13, 13, 14, we had to make significant decisions. We had to make significant reductions, programming staff, to simply be able to grow and have a fund balance and reserves in the outer years. And so if you look at how this is projected over the last, really 6 budget cycles, we've done a really good job of keeping our fund balance and reserves at appropriate levels. You say healthy, people think it's too much. I think sometimes that's almost a negative connotation. They're appropriate. Now, you'll see in 2021, you see that large decrease. That's the result of using $2.4 million from the capital reserve so that the 2019 capital project did not cost local taxpayers. So we put money in the capital reserve so that we wouldn't cost taxpayers new tax dollars. So that's where you see that significant drop. But then also you'll note that in the gray, which is the unassigned, has ticked up significantly, and that's a result of, that's the COVID effect of having significant decreases in expenses and not necessarily having an ability to use them until we knew where we were. If you recall, we made reductions last year because we were fearful that there was going to be a cliff this year that was then going to impact our ability to, to keep programs in place. So financially, we're in a good spot right now. Now, in those years right after the cliff, so, here's the cliff. We made layoffs in 12, 13, 13, 14. So there was a period of time, 14, 15 to 17, 18, where we made investments back into programs and staffing. And this is just as simple as if the budget grew at 2% every year, orange line, and how the budget actually grew over that same period of time. We have not grown significantly, and we actually had a couple years of some sizable decrease in spending as a result of 12, 13, 13, 14, and really go back to the way we dealt with that ARA fund. So the reason why I share this, and I'll pause here for a second, we've been down this road before. We know what happens when you're not careful with reserve use and fund balance use, and we know what happens when you push off making program reductions or expenditure reductions without, a plan. And so we're not suggesting that this is what we're going to experience. What we're saying is we understand what Kathy means by cliff years, and we understand that we need to have funds available to get us through those cliff years. And again, the decisions we made last year, which were painful and difficult, were actually smart in light of where we are and what we have to do. So again, I don't mean that, reducing positions is ever a good thing, but it was a smart decision to make at that time, even though it was tough. So, when you think of what do you do after, so you get through that period of time, you make some tough decisions, then you say, okay, we're going to talk about reinvestment and plan moving forward. Well, this is what we did for those 3 years. In 17, 18, actually, we did not add additional programs. We paused because we added back. So think of this. We added back $1.5 million, or really 1.3, because the one Boces position is not on our payroll. We added back $1.3 million in payroll over that 3-year period of time. Now, the $1.3 million then compounds due to salary increases, and then with health insurance increases, that really snowballed. Now, you could say we shouldn't have done that, and that was a mistake. I would argue that when we made the reductions in 12, 13, 13, 14, we were in a need for staff, and once we had a better position, we felt like we could, we did. But what happened is, as health insurance went up and some of our other unexpected costs, we had to make reductions in 18, 19, and then last year. And I'll talk about that, and we'll kind of show you where we are today with that. But just wanted to spend a little bit of time to say, we've been here before, and what we've learned is that this right here, of going back and quickly putting back all these staffing, in hindsight, we probably didn't need to do that, although, again, I can argue financially, but at the time, programmatically, we felt like we had. So you've asked that great question. What can we do if the budget looks better? Our only conversation now would be is we just want to make sure that this doesn't happen and that we actually can get through and afford it. And I'll show you why. I mean, it's pretty clear.
So one point, though, I want to make about that is not all the positions are restored. It was a
Correct.
Small subset of positions that we felt were high need were restored.
Right, and I'm going to get to that because I think there's an important assessment of, so what are we spending our money on and what do we think we should in the future? And again, that's a very credible. The problem was we were in such a position in 12, 13, and 13, 14 that we allowed ourselves to get into that we had to make drastic cuts that we haven't been able to bring back. Now, our enrollment was significantly higher back then, too. It was about 2,800. Now, I say it was significantly higher. We're at 2,600, as you saw last. We're still growing, but, we're not as high as we were. But it's just this constant moving shell to try to make sure that we have enough money in reserves, enough money in fund balance, and that we're meeting the needs of obviously our students, while also negotiating contracts and trying to upgrade your facilities. It's been a really difficult at times, but, productive process that we've used. And again, I just want to say, for you, we've been through this before. We have a good team. Cynthia's been through it. Jeff's been through it. And even, I think, Bill and Greg, you came in at the end of that. You've been through this, too. We want to be cautiously optimistic right now. All right, so this is is the question that I think all of us need to answer moving forward, and I'm glad it came up last meeting because it really is, does your budget should be a reflection of your strategic plan. And so if it's not, then you have to ask yourself, what are we doing? If this is our priority and our budget doesn't support it, then we need to have that conversation. And you've seen this, I'm not going to read this to you, our mission, vision, core beliefs, and then our priorities. And these are priorities that we've worked on for 5 years. We took a pause this year. We will resume, based on the circumstances. But we have a plan in place through 2023. So when we create a strategic plan, it's a 5-year plan, moving plan. So it's not as if we don't have a plan, but we need to work on it. So here's why I share that with you. If you look at what we currently spend our funds on, and this isn't everything, but I was trying to be high level tied to the strategic plan. We started in 2015, we started a summer, we called it an enrichment program at the time. Now this year we're calling it an intervention program because of, obviously, things have changed. We've maintained throughout this whole system, throughout the whole reductions across the district, 80 reductions, we still have maintained early kindergarten and transitional first grade. And we're one of the few school districts in the region that have that and have had it. And we didn't move away from that because it's valued, and it's probably the biggest and best intervention you can have at an early age. We provide a very, very robust special education program and supports, including 12-month programming in-house. And that's obviously kudos to, our directors and our staff, but also our parents have asked for it, and we've tried to accommodate where we can. And I think, again, people have said people like to come here because of the programming. I think that has to do more with the people that work here than the actual program. We provide elementary literacy specialists, dedicated at the elementary level, K-5. And then we've spent a lot of time and effort and training and funds with RTI. And that came out of a very comprehensive special ed audit that we did that basically said you're classifying too many students because you don't have a response intervention program, and you're classifying students that aren't necessarily disabled. And we said, we'll classify every student who has a disability, but we should never classify a student who doesn't. And so that work and investment, which continues today, has been probably the most needed of any investment because and you'll see when you see our annual reports from Vanessa, if you look at the numbers of classification of students, it's down. It doesn't mean students don't have issues or problems academically, but they may not be disabled. And that's what we really are trying to deal with. So when you look at this and you say, okay, where are we spending our money and why? This is really more focused on the elementary, that aligns with what we're trying to do. And then also I'd say at the secondary level, we just had a meeting with SUNY Broome, I was going to say Broome Community College. We have 153 students in our high school that are taking one or more dual enrollment college courses. So they're getting college credit while also fulfilling their high school credit, whether it's in social studies, science, English, math, PE, art. And then we're also still offering honors and AP courses. So again, we are offering, for a school our size, which is not a big school, we are offering significant offerings, or we're providing significant offerings for our students. We have electives in music, art, tech, media, communications, and business, along with all the electives for the courses like social studies, science, math, English, language. We offer co-curricular activities, and we offer 7-12 athletics, and obviously we've been successful there, along with our other programs. We've provided now one-to-one mobile learning devices and other technology services, both for students and staff. And again, thankful to some of our benefactors who have provided us with some help, but also because we've made some timely and smart decisions from an investment standpoint regarding technology. And then, again, we'll spend a little more time on this. We've invested $91 million since 2007 in our facilities to make sure that they're where they need to be regarding our students' needs, health, safety, and staying current. So, again, are we spending our money where we need to? I guess that's debatable, but if you align it with what our strategic plan is, I would argue that we're in the ballpark. Now, here's the next question, though, it's probably more important at this point. So, the next 3 to 5 years, 2 to 3 years, whatever time span we want to put on it, knowing that anything past 1 to 2 to 3 years sometimes is difficult really to know. But here's where we've assessed the needs, and I'm hoping that this isn't a shock, and probably is something you've heard too. And a lot of this came up through the thought exchange. So we recognize class sizes, both in elementary, high school, and middle school, have been identified as an issue. We made some reductions last year. It had some impact at the middle school in particular, because we've had a couple big classes due to enrollment increases, and we've got some larger class sizes. So if larger class sizes continue and we're not able to schedule creatively so that that's not an issue, for example, in an elementary classroom, if our enrollment is X and we only have 5 teachers and it ends up being a 29 to 30 average class size, we're going to have to address that. So we definitely have to address class size. And the argument could be, where is it K-5 versus 6-12? I think the argument can be made across the board. It isn't just one over the other. But the immediate needs definitely at the elementary, again, because we can't have class sizes of 28 or 30 and expect that to be optimal learning. And we've been addressing that. The next bullet, interventions and social emotional services and supports. And that's anything from programming to people. And one of the stipulations in the American Rescue Act or stimulus package that was just signed is that there are buckets where you're supposed to spend that money. So some of the money is supposed to be earmarked for intervention services, summer programming, and then others are supposed to be utilized for social emotional services, and that could be anything from people to programming. So, we recognize over the next couple of years, not only a result of COVID, but a result of just the need overall in our school community. Now, we did add a guidance counselor this year in the high school. We have that in the budget now, and that was initially a 1-year investment because of the circumstances. We feel we can afford that and we need it. So just as an example, that would be an example of investing in that category. We've heard a lot of high school parents and students say, geez, we'd like more offerings and electives and programs, and not just courses in the high school. So, workforce development programs. New Visions would be probably the greatest example. That's kind of a hybrid of both academic but also work experience. Our P-TECH, we've invested significantly in P-TECH, which is where students start as early as they're identified in 8th grade, and from 9th, they go from 9th grade to a high school diploma to an associate's degree. And that's for students that have specific need. It's a need-based program, and we've invested in that, and we've been successful. We've had students just started to have the first cohort graduating, and so it's been successful. And then computer science has now been thrust on the forefront for New York State. This is now a requirement. Our students are going to have computer science, which means we're going to have to invest at some point in either faculty or programming to address the requirement, but we also feel as if this is an area that's almost a no-brainer from the standpoint of students and workforce development, career development opportunities. This is not everything. This is just an example of what we recognize and we've heard. And then the fourth bullet, and this is something that we recognize is needed. It's not, to me, that's not reactionary. It's more of, yes, we recognize that's something we need to do. We need to be doing it regularly. We need to be doing it with student, staff, and we need to be doing it consistently. It's not a one and done. And so that's an area that we recognize we're going to have to address. And that's anything from programming for students, training for students and staff, to looking at our hiring practices to say, if we can address and find applicants that are not necessarily one particular racial group, if you will, then we should be doing everything we can to at least expand to try to be as diverse in our outreach as possible. So, that's a lot of that's come out of the work. I know our board policy education material review is doing work on that. And that's just an honest kind of look inside the organization and say, yeah, we should be spending some time and potentially budget towards that. And then the last thing is really more of just a comment / expectation. We've roller coastered at times in the district. We've heard a lot of complaints. Why does it seem like every year there's a problem? Why are we constantly kind of yo-yoing? I think we're making some decisions that are going to address that. And that is legitimate. And again, part of that also goes back to not making decisions quickly, not recognizing the outer year outcomes. And so again, I go back to how we address the initial federal stimulus, the ERA fund. So, you know, I will pause here. I don't want to monopolize, but, you know, I know this can get bigger, and we expect this to get bigger, and we expect to do some outreach, and we're going to need to do some surveys, and we want to collect some data from parents and staff and students. But, you know, this to me, and I think, Belinda, you had brought it up, you know, so what's our plan for the next couple of years? I think this is exactly what we need to do, is what is our plan? Because when things turn, and it looks like there's some normalcy, and we have money to invest in programming for students, what's it going to be? So
I would say the previous slide is, you know, our priorities of what we're going to keep and maintain.
Yep.
And then that slide you were just showing is new, is kind of where we're heading, what we want to, our goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so the last item, and then again, obviously it's a dialogue, so ask any questions at any time. You know, people have asked, I know the board has asked, so let's talk about particular areas in the budget and spend a little bit of time about discussing them. So we picked several that are big items, but also there were questions through thought exchange that we thought the more we can educate, the better. So this is taking all of our, and again, the 21, 22 are projected, and even 2021, that's still a moving target because the budget season is not over. So these are projections. Cynthia, I use these off of the spreadsheet that Dennis had given me on the revenue side. So that's where those numbers are coming from. I know you would ask. So the point here, I think the takeaway is if you look from where we're spending money, so there are 3 instructional lines. It's K3, 4, 6, and 7, 12. You can see each color represents a different group. And then professional salaries. And professional salaries, let me just move Cynthia over. Professional salaries, I've noted at the bottom, just to give you an idea of what is in a professional salary. So that's everyone from related services, speech, OT, PT, all special education instructional staff, adaptive PE, which is a PE teacher, all of our librarians, and then all of our administration. So that line here represents all those. And then you can see this is 712, this is K3, and then this is 4-6. So a couple things to note from 15-16 to projected for next year, those lines are pretty flat. And they're flat because you go back to all the things we talked about earlier. We have made some reductions, then we've hired back, then we've made some reductions. So we've stayed relatively consistent, but that's not necessarily a good thing because, you know, each year salaries go up, there's inflation, right? You bring in people with salaries equivalent to the people that left. Those numbers should be somewhat rising, and they are slightly, but they're not significant. You know, a couple areas. We do have a little uptick here. This is probably more a result of some enrollment increases at the elementary level that we've had to address. And then these here, the largest here is special ed, would be our biggest probably reason for why that line is bending up. But this is an area that caught my eye. This is 712. So this is all secondary from 7-8 the middle school to 9-12. This actually, you'll see, has actually decreased. And so, you know, when you go back to our needs and you go back to our priorities, that would be an area that I would think we would study and look at and say, okay, what does that mean? What can that look like? And what do we need to, you know, reevaluate? So, again, a different way of looking at data, but it shows a little bit of, you know, some trends that we've been dealing with, and, you know, it kind of tells a little bit of a story.
So the 7 through 12 decrease, I guess, we've had a lot of retirements, right?
We have not filled, yep, you're right.
So.
Yep. And we've made some reductions. You know,
Yeah, all right, both.
Made reductions, yep. I'd say at the high school, you know, the middle school last year, the teaming model was eliminated. And at the high school level, we've made reductions mainly through attrition that has now put us at basically the bare bones of staffing for math, science, social studies, English, language, where any fluctuation in enrollment is going to make class sizes large. And especially in electives where a class where there's only the ability to offer a couple sections because of staffing, and if students want to take them, you can have classes of 31, 34, which is high, regardless, it's high. So this is definitely an area that I think we will want to pay attention to in the next couple of years and identify, how we could invest there.
So the professional increase because of special ed, is that for 21, 22, having to hire positions, or?
Cynthia, well, we hired the guidance counselor, so that's new.
Okay.
Cynthia, how would you best explain that? And this is a forecast, so I think that's a fair question.
Well, there's been some, again, your guidance counselor falls into that. Also, we have included some staff development in the 21-22 budget that was not in the 2021 budget. And so a combination of that and just the additional need for special education.
And that's, again, they're all projections. And again, I know I highlighted it because of the growth and again, it's all projections. So this is also, and I will move through these. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to see, and then, please ask any questions. Oops, I'll just move Cynthia. So, two areas of BOCES. So we have our BOCES budget, and it's broken out into general services and special education services. And this is an area, and so special ed is in blue, general services in orange. If you look at general services since 2015-16, it's relatively flat. There's some cost adjustment there, but it stayed relatively flat. If you look at special ed, and this is one of the areas that during a couple of our budget cycles where we had some unexpected costs, there's been a pretty significant increase. And while there was a decrease, still year from 15-16 to current, again, that's an area that we've exhibited some increases in costs. Those are costs that are need-based, and an IEP is a legal document, and if it's required, then you provide it. So not a lot of wiggle room to address many of those. Now, health insurance, we've talked about this. I don't want to belabor this, although I do have some new data to share. We've shown this before. This was, if you go back to those years when we had to make some decisions, we had special ed and health insurance cost increases based on large claims, which then led to larger premiums. We know that this is an issue, and there was a pretty stinging thought exchange comment that I still remember. Basically said, stop complaining about health insurance and figure out how to fix it. That was basically the essence of it. And forgive me if someone's out there that wrote that, I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically it. So, here's what we've said. We're making some decisions. You agreed. We left the consortium. We're moving to a self-insured model. We feel very confident about that. And then also, we've been negotiating with all 6 bargaining units on potential move to this high deductible plan. And so what we didn't share with you, but we think is really, the essence of why this is such a significant decision and move. So here's what the costs are expected for next year for the consortium. And this is based on Excellus, which we currently are in. So we know that we're moving, but for now, we're moving the umbrella. We're not moving the plan. So the costs are the costs. That doesn't matter. So for next year, a family plan is slated to be $37,879. Individual plan, $15,256. If we move and get our collective bargaining units to move to the high deductible, which you have 2 contracts in front of you tonight that have, and we have 3 more that are moving, actually 4 more that are moving in that direction. Those are the savings per plan. So if you do the math, and like we said, we showed you the savings potential, it's massive. Now, we obviously are negotiating, and so it's not pure savings because you're negotiating back, but when people ask us fix health insurance from the community, we think this is a win-win. Win for the staff and faculty and win for the community. So we are listening. And then debt service, again, this is an area that people ask, why are we continually spending money? Where does that money go? What's it needed for? This is interest, debt, or principal, and then total debt. So you'll see that, yes, we have seen an increase. We did have a 2019 capital project, and we have the 2019 EPC project, the solar array out in Maine-Endwell. That's the cause for the uptick. And yes, we're gonna spend more interest, and we're gonna have to spend more on principal. However, like we talked about, building aid is a positive correlation with debt service. So as your debt service goes up, your building aid goes up as well, and it follows that same relationship. And again, a lot of people ask, I still don't understand why you're spending that money. What is it used for? So I think it's important too, when you think about what have we done the last 12 or 14 years, and Cynthia, I'm sorry, I'm gonna move you. And again, just the overall, why are we spending money? Because if we don't spend money on facilities and they become run down or obsolete, then you have parents and faculty and students saying, geez, you know, this place, everything in here is outdated and it doesn't work, and, you know, we're not proud to be part of this school because of our, you know, lousy conditions. Well, here's what we've done. You know, we've renovated every building, including our transportation department. So every facility, in this district has been touched since 2007, excuse me. Now, we had a flood in 2011 that caused us to have to create a new maintenance facility next to our football stadium and baseball field, and we had to pick that up using funds from the 2007 capital project. So we even have a brand new maintenance facility that I didn't throw in here as well. We've put classroom space at the high school, middle school, and HB. And HB is obviously the one we just completed. Renovations to all the auditoriums, including a new one at the middle school. That was a big capstone of 2007. Brand new athletic facilities, physical education space, including a brand new pool, which has been used a lot and has been very successful. All the libraries have been renovated. And we would like you to have an opportunity when you can and you're comfortable and we're more open. You've got to check out the libraries at the middle school and high school. While the space has not necessarily changed, meaning the footprint, it's a beautiful, beautiful facility, and that was our last, you know, those needed to be done. We are now 100% district electricity generating. We're generating our own electricity. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. We have made entrances, renovations to entrances, security features, safety features, hardened glass, new vestibules with dedicated security features and cameras. And then the last one, obviously we've made, you know, we've changed lights, we've changed windows, our roofs are more energy efficient, and they're still on warranty, which again is a good thing. So when people ask, why are you spending this money? It's like a house, right? If you let a house go, it all seems to fall apart at the same time, and now you've got to make a huge capital investment versus a small one. So our goal in 2007 was that the district hadn't had a capital project in many years before that. I was a high school principal, and we spent $59.6 million because we needed it. And as Jeff and I recall, it was actually 70, and it started at 150. And it came down to 70 million, and then it finally was 59.6. So after that, the time, and Greg and Bill from a community standpoint, and whoever was part of the community, we said we're not going to let stuff go so that in 10 or 12 years you have to spend $50 million just to make things, you know, decent. We want to be strategic about investing every 5 years. So we're on a 5-year plan. Now, 2007, 2014, understand we made massive reductions to staffing in 12-13 that didn't feel right to go out for a capital project, but we knew we needed to. And then this 2019, this current project, again, staying to that 5-year plan. So if you follow the 5-year plan, what's nice about this is, in 2023-ish, 24, the 2007 debt is coming off the books, which is going to allow us to go out for another capital project without tax impact to the community, because we're replacing debt service A with debt service B. Now that's a decision that's going to have to be made in the future, and probably sooner than later, because you have to start planning several years before you get to that point. And we know that there's some things that got bumped from this current project that probably are going to be on that list, but believe it or not, we're going to have to start talking about a capital project sooner than you think.
Jason,
Yes.
could you go back just one chart? So that gray line down there, I just want to point that out, that is the net to the district, and that's pretty flat.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So, you know, and it's probably not even increasing at 2%, but, well, maybe it is, but anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And that,
Because of the aid.
well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's why we had that capital reserve, so that you wouldn't see a spike, for the last project. And we thought that was a huge objective of having a capital project, or excuse me, having a capital reserve, that we didn't want that to impact people, so. And I won't go over this at length, but I think it's important because community members will ask us, and again, think of it this year, the project starts, COVID hits, schools aren't being used, no one's in session, but we're out there, putting up, facilities and renovating facilities, and people kept asking us, why are you spending that money? You're laying people off, but you're still spending money. Well, capital funds are earmarked specifically for capital projects. So, the process is simple. We have to do a building condition survey, and we're up. So this year, we are up to have one done. Every 5 years, the state says, we're forcing you, and we're going to pay you. So they incentivize us with aid to get this done. And that point in blue is right off the facilities website for SED. The reason for it is to make sure that we provide suitable and adequate facilities for students and programs for students and staff in the district. So they're forcing us to keep our facilities updated. The district then goes out to voters approve it. NYSED then says, we're going to give you aid because we want to incentivize you and support that. And then the formula is driven by what is aidable, and there's a whole formula that goes with the work done on a school building. Some's aidable, some's not. And then there's a cost index from construction and regional costs depending on where you are, so downstate versus upstate. That's what then determines how much aid you get. So in this district, Jeff, what is our building aid ratio for this last project on average? What was our building aid ratio? Do you remember?
I believe it was either right around the lower 90% range.
So we're generating 90 cents on the dollar, which is why that local share is so small by doing this. That's the incentive from New York State to get you to keep your facilities updated. And then that last bullet, that's important. That building aid can't be turned and used for hiring teachers or, buying books. It's strictly for making your mortgage payment, if you will. And so again, as we show, and we're going to show this, we've showed this before, but when people look, if you want to look at a capital project and how it's financed and the significance of building aid, so our budget's going up $1.5 million on the debt service side. Our building aid's going up 1.4. The net increase for the local share is about $99,000 or $100,000. Now, again, we recognize money's money, and in a tight budget, we're not saying that that's not significant. However, by leveraging New York State through the building aid, that's all New York State funds. So I want to make one point. I should have stopped. Building aid is all of New York State's funds from New York City to Buffalo to North Country to the central New York to our region in a pool and divvied up to school districts as the projects are approved. So 90 cents of every dollar is coming from all of New York State to finance Maine-Endwell's project. Now, if you think of it that way, and again, I know taxes drive people crazy and people don't like to pay them, and it sounds almost, counterproductive to say that, but we are leveraging New York State and receiving 90 cents on the dollar to keep our facilities at a high level. So, that's why we do capital projects, and that's why it makes sense to do capital projects.
Jason, also on that slide too, don't forget, with our energy performance contract, you don't see that in those numbers, but it's also a significant reduction of all of our electrical expenses.
Right.
So our debt service, so our total amount went up $100,000, but we're also saving $250,000 in electrical costs with that EPC project that we did.
Yeah. Okay, so from this point forward, all the way up to April 19th, we'll start providing recommendations for the board, and obviously it's for you. It's a recommendation. It's not, concrete decision, but we're going to make some recommendations, and then obviously by the 19th we'll finalize them. So we've done this now for 10 years, and I go back to the first slide with when we used all of our fund balance, and we had that cliff, and we had to make all those reductions. We had told ourselves at that time, fund balance is important. And while some people will say, if you have the money, spend it, our philosophy has been, that's fine, but we need to make sure that we have money in the bank for future unexpected costs and claims that arise. So our recommendation is that we continue to follow the board policy and try to keep up to 4%. Now, this year's different. We're gonna have more than 4%, but we're hoping that the state allows us to carry that extra bit, because of the circumstance. And again, this is just right from the OSC. Fund balance is an indicator of whether or not you are in good financial condition. And again, you gotta have it to be in good financial condition. We recommend staying at the tax levy limit. To be honest with you, I know this has been a conversation piece before. There have been times where, it was possible that that would be an option that we should look at. But with the stimulus funds and the state aid where they are, we don't believe that's necessary. So we would not recommend exceeding the tax levy limit. This is just generic, but I want to put it out there. Again, we're not going to save money to then take opportunities away from kids. However, we can't simply forget that you need to have money. And fund balance and reserves are different, right? Fund balance is the accumulation of reserves and unassigned fund balance. So you have to have reserves too. Reserves are those specific savings accounts. And we're using, in this year's budget, we're using over $640,000 to help offset some of our costs. So we're not just sitting on it, we're using it, but you gotta have it too, and you can't just let it all run out.
So 21, 22, we would not be using it, hopefully not have to use any reserve.
Hopefully not.
Okay.
If we do, then, we will, but yeah, that's kind of our hope, is to take away that amount that we already have earmarked in there. Yep. Now, this is kind of to where we were discussing earlier. Our recommendation is absolutely what was discussed, and has been discussed really since October, 3 to 5 year plan. Really take a dive into what do we want to invest in, what do we want to reallocate, what do we believe the district is missing, where do we think we need to strengthen or continue, and that really ties all around the strategic plan and engaging the community, which is part of what this board has said we want to do. We want to keep the community engaged. So, to me, this is our next step, is to keep that conversation. Not as soon as the money comes in, say, well, let's just put everything back because that's what we should do. We might put some back, but we also need to think forward, and not just thinking backwards. And again, it's not a knock, it's just, I think that's a smart point. And then the last one is our bus replacement plan. This is, and we'll explain this, what we're asking for is a proposition on the vote. So there's the budget vote, there's the bus vote, and then there's the election. 3 things on May 18th. We have been very, very, I think, smart with our investment so that we never run into a situation where we have buses that are falling apart and then we have to buy more than the normal rotation. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So we currently have, and this is right from Mike Albel, we have 42 buses, we have there's 42 vehicles, 34 buses, and you can see the breakouts, some other small, more specialized buses. And so we are on a schedule where we know that when buses hit anywhere from 120 to 140,000 miles, the cost of maintaining them go up significantly. So you can have a bus at 140,000 miles that can cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to $30,000 to repair and maintain because it's at that end life, if you will. So our point is, if we can keep our fleet under that number by continuously updating and rotating and not letting a huge chunk get to that age, that we won't have these maintenance costs. So what we're going to ask for is to buy 4 buses, but these are the 4 buses that would come off of the fleet and then be sold for trade-in value. And we will put a slide together for the budget hearing, but we receive around 82 to 83% aid. So think building aid. We receive that aid back on transportation. And those buses, over 5 years, you amortize it over 5 years, they end up costing about $12,000 when it's all said and done annually, because we're able to spread those out and receive that large amount of aid. So, but again, you'll note the mileage on these buses and the years. And Mike Allwell had put and I should have backed up, this last paragraph is really, pretty significant. So we've seen an increase in ridership, which is the number of students that obviously get on a bus. And because we've been running so low staffing-wise in transportation, we've actually had to take 34 runs and make them 30. And you'll see, we're constantly trying to find drivers, keep drivers. They require training, they require licensure, and they're a mobile group because of the time and the work hours. So it's been a struggle, but, we're making it work, and I think our DOT inspection rate was almost near 100, which is, obviously 100 is perfect. You want to be 95 or above is the target. So we've made a good investment in this area, and our recommendation is to keep with that plan.
So is that why it's a separate vote, because it's transportation aid? I wasn't sure.
I think it's just a separate proposition because it's not tied, it's like a capital project. It's not tied to the budget, it's its own separate, vote.
So we replaced 3 buses last year.
Yep.
So did we get that value for them, for the ones that we replaced?
Yeah, we probably, Jeff, last year, if they may have been more, we might have got more. You mean the surplus value? When we,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were close to 5,000 each. These are much older, and
Okay.
that trade-in value is less.
But don't forget the value of the buses that you get gets taken off of the purchase price of the new one, so you lose the aid value of the trade-in or the sales price of them, so you don't get to double dip and keep the full value of the price you bought it 10, 12 years ago and get the pocket $5,000 or $8,000 when you sell it. That gets netted against your transportation aid.
Yeah.
So this is our, again, I wish we had more tangible data to show regarding numbers for the working budget, but right now, as Cynthia had mentioned, information is coming in at a pretty rapid pace, and until we know, really the state budget, whether it's going to be enacted, and that is on April 1st, which is our next board meeting, so we hope to have some information. We may not have all the information until that 19th, so I know we said we may have a budget workshop, we may not. I think by next board meeting, we should determine if we need another budget workshop, because the budget has to be adopted on the 19th of April. Cynthia, anything else to add, or Jeff?
No, I have nothing else to add.
Oh, good.
Vicki or Tom, any questions? Okay. All right. Any questions?
Okay, for me, thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Cynthia.
Bye.